Audrey Hepburn was one of the most beloved actresses Hollywood had ever seen. Her smile could light up any room, and her natural grace was something no director could teach or any script could capture. Audiences around the world fell in love with her through timeless films like Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's. To most people, she seemed almost perfect, like someone who had stepped out of a fairy tale and into real life. She carried herself with a kind of quiet beauty that made it hard to believe she could ever truly suffer. But behind all of that elegance and all of those carefully taken photographs, there was a very different story waiting to be told. The truth is that Audrey Hepburn felt everything deeply. She loved fully, she gave everything she had to the people she cared about, and she was hurt more than once by the very love she so desperately wanted. She married twice, and both times the marriage ended in pain. She experienced heartbreak not just once, but again and again throughout her life. The woman the world saw on screen, so poised and untouchable, was in private someone searching for something very simple, a real and lasting love, a family, and a life that felt like home. What makes her story even more fascinating is the contrast between what the world believed about her and what was actually happening behind closed doors. How could someone who brought so much beauty and magic to the screen be carrying so much quiet sadness in her own heart? That question sits at the center of everything, and the answer reveals a woman far more human, far more relatable, and far more moving than any character she ever played. If you enjoy stories about the real lives behind Hollywood's most iconic names, this channel is the place for you. We go beyond the glamour and dig into the moments that shaped these legends when no one was watching. Subscribe now so you never miss a story, because the most powerful chapters are often the ones kept hidden from the world. Now, before we go any further, here is something worth thinking about. What is the one Audrey Hepburn film you could watch over and over again? Leave your answer in the comments below. We would genuinely love to know. To understand Audrey's story fully, you have to go back to where it all began. She did not grow up in comfort or privilege. As a young girl in the Netherlands, she lived through the brutal years of World War II. She experienced hunger, fear, and loss at an age when most children are simply playing and growing up without worry. Those years shaped her in ways that stayed with her forever. They gave her a quiet strength, yes, but also a deep emotional sensitivity and a longing for safety and love that never fully went away. When she arrived in Hollywood in the early 1950s, she was not the loud, dramatic kind of star the industry was used to. She was different, understated, and genuinely humble, and that difference was exactly what made her unforgettable. As her career began to take off, she was still a young woman figuring out who she was and what she truly wanted. Fame was not the dream she had carried since childhood. What she wanted most was something far simpler. She wanted love, and she wanted a family. That longing became very real when she began filming Sabrina in 1953, the role that would make her a global star. But while audiences were discovering her on screen, something else was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. It was on the set of that film that she met William Holden. At the time, Holden was already one of Hollywood's biggest names. He was confident, charming, and had a kind of easy authority that came from years at the top of the industry. For Audrey, still adjusting to her sudden fame, being around someone so sure of himself felt reassuring and safe. Their friendship grew naturally as filming continued. They would laugh together between takes, and their conversations would go on long after the cameras had stopped rolling. There was a warmth between them that the people around them could clearly sense, even if neither of them ever announced it out loud. For Audrey, this was not a casual feeling. What she felt for William Holden was real, and it was growing into something she had not expected. But there was a painful truth standing between them that no amount of feeling could change. William Holden was already married, and beyond that, he had years earlier made a permanent decision that meant he would never be able to have children. For Audrey, whose greatest dream in life was to become a mother, that truth was devastating. The future she had quietly started imagining with him simply was not possible. And so, despite how real and deep her feelings were, she made the difficult choice to walk away. It was not dramatic or public, it was just a quiet, heartbreaking end to something that had barely begun. After stepping back from that situation, Audrey turned her attention toward her work and her life beyond the film set. Hollywood was opening up for her in extraordinary ways, but she was not the kind of person who could ever be fully satisfied by success alone. She needed something more personal than applause and award nominations. She needed to feel at home somewhere, with someone. That sense of belonging seemed to appear when she grew closer to Mel Ferrer. He was not a typical Hollywood personality. He was thoughtful, well-read, and genuinely passionate about art, theater, and literature. When the two of them talked, their conversations went somewhere real. They moved beyond the usual small talk of Hollywood parties and into deeper ideas about creativity and meaning in life. For Audrey, that kind of connection felt rare and precious. Here was someone who seemed to truly see her. They married in 1954 in a quiet ceremony in Switzerland, away from the glamour of Hollywood. Many people close to Audrey believed she had finally found what she was looking for. Someone who understood her work, respected her sensitivity, and shared her love for the arts. And for a time, the marriage seemed to prove them right. The two of them worked together professionally, supporting each other's projects. Mel even directed Audrey in a stage production that would win her a Tony Award. In the eyes of the world, they appeared to be one of Hollywood's most refined and admired couples. Then, in 1960, Audrey gave birth to their son, Sean. And in that moment, something shifted inside her in a way that no achievement in her career ever had. Motherhood brought her a joy that felt complete and unconditional. Those who knew her during that period noticed how calm she seemed, how grounded, as if she had finally found the thing she had been reaching for all her life. But the happiness she felt as a mother could not hide the growing problems within her marriage. Slowly, quietly, things between Audrey and Mel began to break down. The pressures that came with their careers, the demands on their time, and unspoken tensions that had been building for years were creating a distance neither of them could bridge. There were whispers of jealousy, of personal conflicts, of two people who had grown apart in ways they could no longer ignore. By 1968, after 14 years of marriage, it was over. Sometimes a relationship does not end with a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it simply fades, slowly and sadly, into something that no longer resembles what it once was. Once again, Audrey found herself alone and searching. She was in her late 30s now, a woman of extraordinary accomplishment and global admiration, and yet, in her personal life, she carried a familiar kind of emptiness. She stepped back from Hollywood more deliberately during this time. The constant filming, the public attention, the demands of being a star felt less important than finding peace. It was in 1968, while on a Mediterranean cruise, that she met Andrea Dotti. He was an Italian psychiatrist, calm and intelligent, and he moved through the world very differently from the actors and directors she had known for so long. To Audrey, being with him felt like stepping into a quieter, more grounded kind of life. They married in 1969 in Rome, and many of the people who loved her believed this time might truly be different. Here was a man outside the chaos of the film industry, someone who could offer her the stable and private life she had always dreamed about. In 1970, their son Luca was born, and Audrey's world once again centered on motherhood. She spent most of her time in Italy and Switzerland, deliberately staying away from film roles in the entertainment world, choosing instead to be present for her children. For a while, the life she had always wanted seemed within reach. But the peace did not last. Reports began to surface that Andrea was unfaithful, that he had been involved with other women. Audrey tried to hold the marriage together at first. She had already known heartbreak, and she did not want to go through it again. But the whispers did not stop, and eventually the truth became impossible to deny. By the early 1980s, that marriage, too, had come to an end.
The quiet life she had hoped to build had slipped through her fingers once more.
These losses would have broken many people. But Audrey responded in the way she always had, by redirecting her energy towards something meaningful. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, she had stepped almost entirely away from acting and was dedicating herself to humanitarian work with UNICEF. The cause resonated with something very personal inside her. She had been a hungry, frightened child during the war. She had known what it felt like to have nothing. Now, with the platform her fame had given her, she traveled to some of the most impoverished and struggling parts of the world. She spoke honestly and with deep compassion about what she witnessed, about children living in poverty and hunger, about communities that the rest of the world had turned away from. In doing this work, Audrey found a sense of purpose that felt more meaningful than anything her career had ever given her. The young woman who had once enchanted the world from a movie screen had become something far more powerful, a real voice for real people. And it was during this quieter, more purposeful chapter of her life that someone new came into it, almost without announcement. His name was Robert Wolders. He was a Dutch actor who had worked in European and American television, but he was nothing like the larger-than-life personalities Audrey had encountered throughout her Hollywood years. He was gentle, thoughtful, and calm in a way that felt grounding rather than overwhelming. They met around 1980 through mutual friends, not at any glamorous event, not in front of cameras, just two people being introduced in an ordinary way. Their relationship did not rush forward. It grew slowly, shaped by real conversation, shared history, and a mutual understanding that went deeper than most people ever find. Robert, like Audrey, had spent much of his life in Europe and carried memories of the war years. That shared background gave them a connection that went beyond the surface. They understood each other without having to explain everything. There was no drama, no public display, and no headlines, just two people who genuinely enjoyed being together. Those who knew Audrey during her years with Robert often noticed something different about her. She seemed more at ease than she had in a very long time. The constant tension that had quietly lived beneath her graceful exterior seemed to soften. She laughed more easily. She moved through her days with less weight. The restlessness that had been there for so long seemed, at last, to be settling. They never married, but that did not diminish what they had. Together they traveled, spent peaceful time in Switzerland and California, and Robert stood beside her during her UNICEF work, accompanying her on missions to places most people would never go. He did not need the spotlight for himself. He was simply there for her, steady and present in a way she had rarely experienced before. In the early 1990s, Audrey's health began to fail. She had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, and the illness moved quickly. Through those final months, Robert never left her side. He was there through the uncertainty, through the fear, and through the slow process of letting go. When Audrey Hepburn passed away in January 1993 at her home in Switzerland, he was with her. Looking back at the full arc of her life, what stands out is not the Academy Award or the films that made her a legend. What stands out is the woman behind all of it. A woman who had known war and hunger as a child. A woman who had loved deeply and been hurt more than once. A woman who had held on to the dream of a quiet and loving life, even when life kept pulling it away from her. And a woman who, in the final chapter, finally found what she had always been looking for, not in the spotlight, but in the stillness beside someone who simply loved her without condition. Her story is a reminder that real love is rarely the loudest thing in a room. It does not always arrive with drama or fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly in the form of someone who stays. And for Audrey Hepburn, after everything she had been through, that quiet, enduring presence was worth more than anything fame had ever offered her. If this kind of story speaks to you, if you are drawn to the real and hidden lives of the people who shaped classic Hollywood, then this channel has so much more waiting for you. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. The most powerful moments in history are often the ones that happened when no one was watching, and we're here to uncover every single one of them.